Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we've got TV cameras, so we've got lights for TV cameras, so we can't see any of you. We assume the house is full, but 1,000 people, and we're glad you're all here. Good afternoon. Welcome. This session is B2B distribution in 2021 and beyond. Is wholesale coming back? Did it leave? I don't know. But I think we've got a fascinating topic here. Okay, we're going to get right into it. Your panelists have been introduced by our spokesperson as we paraded in. We're lucky to have 3 individuals with different perspectives, but people who have been in the hotel industry long enough to have a real appreciation for its intricacies, its challenges, its frustrations occasionally. Yes. So this could be classified as an area of frustration sometimes. My first question, and I don't do too many short questions. I'm a consultant by birth, so I like to have long, complex questions. I'm going to ask, what is wholesale in 2021? Where does it fit in the B2B landscape? So I think my research suggests that if I ask what is wholesale to 10 people, I'll get at least 10 different definitions. I find myself saying, are bed banks wholesalers? Is hotel beds a wholesaler? Are tour operators a wholesaler? Are OTAs a wholesaler? Is Expedia, who's represented on our team here, in its optimized distribution program, a wholesaler? So, what is a wholesaler? And I'm looking at you, Gianna. Start us off.
Hello again, everyone. It's my favorite seat. I'd say a wholesaler is a distribution partner that gives us the ability as hoteliers to sell to the consumer today. It's a little bit different than it was before, but to the consumer, and also to resellers to the consumer, right? So the wholesaler today looks very similar to the OTA today, which is very different than what it used to be years ago.
Well, take us back. Tell us about the before and after the wholesaler.
So before, there was not a lot of transparency in the conversation and in the commerce exchange between the hotelier, the buyer, and the buyer, right? So it was a very opaque proposition.
Okay.
And today, technology has enabled that proposition to be done electronically, which has changed the dynamic of who buys and who buys, basically.
All right, fair enough. So it has made it maybe more transparent, maybe faster, still the same faces?
So actually, it's made pieces of the transaction more transparent in the last 10 years. And I would say in the last year or so, since COVID, there's been an acceleration of the transparency with regards to more of the commercial pieces of the transaction that haven't existed before from an onward distribution perspective.
All right, thank you. Good start. Oral, how do you define a wholesaler in the wholesale environment?
I don't think it's that different than wholesale in any other space, right? It's doing things in aggregating transactions for another audience, right? So being the factor in between that aggregates and feeds others. I think the key difference today, in many ways, is that the wholesale community now, it's not about all parts of travel. It's primarily about lodging. There was a time when it was primarily about air, and hotel was incidental. That all changed, and so it's now primarily about hotel. I'd also say that no one's pure anymore. I think it's just now it's more than an entity. It's a business model And a lot of companies have that as a part of their business model.
Okay. To what extent, if at all, does it vary by geography? Is the wholesaler here in North America the same as a wholesaler in South America, in Asia, in Europe?
That is a brilliant question, John. The answer is that the wholesaler does some of the same things. In fact, the reason why they work for hospitality companies, when they do, the reason why they work is because they provide a set of services downstream that we are not going to provide to other sellers, and also in some cases to the consumer. And that also factors into, obviously, geography. A company that we would all see in this room in North America as a leisure wholesaler, and we'll call them a wholesaler, well, in certain geographies around the world, large first-tier countries, they are providing corporate services to travelers who, depending on the company, don't have corporate credit cards, right? So one of the biggest wholesalers in, for instance, South Korea is actually what we would recognize here. They look very much like one of the big TMCs because they're providing vouchers to business travelers and doing things for travelers that don't have credit cards, providing settlement with the hotels. And so, again, they're doing the same kind of things. They have the same set of services, but we see them differently based on what we think they should be doing for us based on where they are.
All right. Really nice addition to what Gianna said. Steve, I'm going to give you some time at the end because I'd really like to hear an update on optimized distribution. I just want to warn you and the audience that we'll be zeroing in on that later on. But let's start with a repeat of the question. How do you define a wholesaler?
I will plead ignorance. So I'm a complete newbie to the industry. I've only been in the industry for about 2 years. And I'll do a quick shout out to Oral, who's actually been an incredible teacher and mentor to me. Literally, my first day of the job at Expedia, actually I spent more time with Oral than anyone else at Expedia, to give you a sense of my learning curve. I would ask the question, John, it was, does it matter? I think there was probably an actual term of art, right, that wholesaler meant kind of back in the day. And I think at least Expedia's point of view, and actually the way I look at it, would be, I don't know if the definition has any resonance today, and I would actually maybe use a different phrase, just call it B2B redistribution. And I look at it as simplest, like you distill it down, it's are you selling something to a customer with a direct, right, interface, direct interaction? And if not, it's really B2B. And I would say there's multitudes of different formats. You could be tour operators, you could be OTAs, you could be wholesalers, you're buying stuff en masse and actually paying as a merchant. I don't know if it really matters. I think from a hotel standpoint, how do I get expanded reach? How do I get good visibility through new customer demand pools? And how do I ultimately make more revenue?
So it's not a type of company, it's a category of service. And it's a service that extends our distribution further than we could do it directly.
Correct. I would say that's really the key benefit is just it's that extension of reach, it's bringing incremental revenue, and really just bringing the ability for great hotels to provide an incredible traveler experience.
Okay. Increased distribution, strengthened onward distribution sounds like something that's appealing, something that's positive. But as I think about conversations, both long ago and more recent about wholesalers, there seems to be an ambiguity with respect to whether we like them or not. So they distribute, they expand our distribution, that's good. I'm going to be kind here and say they disrupt as well as distribute. Are they friend or foe? Let's stay with you, Steve, and ask, are they a net benefit? Are there some good actors and some bad actors? What's your perception?
I think the answer is both. And the way I describe it is there's an amazing opportunity with, call it wholesale B2B redistribution. The reality is there are an incredible sets of unique niche demand pools that one could tap into because of technology, because of the way the world has changed. We're a global, right? We're truly a global community at this point. And the problem is to access that, there's just a lot of bad that comes along with it. And so I think the real role of all the players at this point is we need to collaborate. We need to figure out how to work together to get that good. How do you get that expanded reach? How do you get that expanded visibility? How do you drive incremental revenue? How do you bring just great experiences to people who would not have otherwise experienced that, but for the fact that there's this B2B distribution layer? But you minimize the rate abuse. You minimize lack of control. You give hotels the ability to eventually figure out how to do smart, intelligent revenue management strategies so that everyone can actually win. Because you really want to win in the demand partner side, you want to win in the hotel supply side, and you want to win for the customer. So to me, I think there's incredible opportunity, but there are solutions that we can actually get to a better place.
Okay. I listen to you, and it sounds positive and encouraging. Let me turn to our two hoteliers who are there where the rubber meets the road and really trying to evaluate the opportunity in a specific individual or company who says, trust me. Oral, what do you look for when somebody says, let me onwardly distribute Hilton inventory?
I'm not as trusting as Steve would prefer that we are about the space. I'm kidding. Fundamentally, the challenge, I think I want to sort of begin to disaggregate a bit and say that we have partners in the leisure space that are with us through thick and thin, good and bad times, and they perform, and they do well, and they reach niche customers, and they provide a set of services that, again, we're not going to provide, visas for customers and things like that. Short-term credit for smaller distributors and things like that. But we don't do a good enough job of actually being, I'd say, Darwinian and saying that there are some parties that don't belong at the table. And because of the manual nature of the marketplace and the fragmented nature of the marketplace, we sustain players that then create challenges for everyone. And we support players that actually undermine the value that we get from our good partners. And I think as hoteliers, we have to get better at that. We have to say, here are some great partners that have been with us for a lot of years and will be with us. How do we support them and not continue to enable the ones that are? And disruption is too positive a term. I'd argue that there are folks that are negatively leveraging the arbitrage that you can get from playing with rates that disrupts the marketplace for everyone in a negative way.
You say in theory we should be tougher. Do we have a sense for who those people are? Are we just not coming to grips with the situation?
I think that some of it is, it's on the hotel side in many cases. I always say, supplier, look in the mirror and, be tough on the marketplace, but be tough on ourselves as well. And there is a mode where hotels are doing individual things, and they, in many cases, don't see the challenges. And in some cases, I still have conversations where it sounds like someone believes that putting something on the internet over here is hidden from the rest of the internet. And we just have some work to do, and we have to admit that. Tough on the marketplace, but also clean up our own house.
Okay. Gianna, you've heard Steve and Oral talk about the benefits of wholesalers, but the need to be selective. What's your experience about the proportion that are helpful and are driving onward distribution, and how does Wyndham decide who it wants to play with?
So I have to say I am in complete agreement with Oral in the sense that wholesalers are good. They're a good partner, right? Most of them are, and there is a handful of those that are out there. And I think we as hoteliers do need to do a better job at collaborating with them. They also have a responsibility of, better collaborating with us. And helping us take control of this onward distribution phenomenon that has happened with regards to what we all refer to as rogue distribution partners out there, and that are not playing by the rules, right? We unfortunately gave way to the opportunity over time. And I think what I've seen specifically in the last year or so, I've seen an acceleration, a desire from the good players to want to have a seat at the table, have a conversation, be transparent about their business, share with us what things they're doing to bring back that control. Learn from us what we'd like to see in bringing back the control, because they've realized that by doing that, we create a win-win-win-win situation. And it's time for us to shut the door on some of the bad actors that are out there that have tried to come and cannibalize in the space where they don't belong.
Overall, I listened to what you said and feel somewhat heartened, somewhat encouraged. So it sounds like there is at least a portion of the wholesaler category that wants to cooperate and collaborate. What does that cooperation look like? And I'm thinking here of two areas. One is determining what rooms and really what room types are being sold, deciding what the product looks like when it moves on, and then talking about rates. But let's talk first about rooms. Can a hotel company, should they be able to say, I'm happy to have my inventory go through A, B, C, and D, but not E and F, and you would, by nature, spread it to everybody. Can I be selective? Let's start with you on that one.
We need to be selective. And as a hotelier, that's an expectation that talking to any of the distribution partners that we're talking to, we need to be able to have that level of flexibility to decide who we're going to do business with, and how, and what are the terms by which we want to do business with that partner with. Whether it's making it plain level field for everyone, or maybe being a little bit more competitive. But I think that at the end of the day, I'm always looking for that opportunity for us to be able to take that control instead of handing it over.
All right. Oral, are we making headway in talking to people about the sub-channels and the sub-channels in which our inventory is distributed by those wholesalers?
The answer is yes, and there are a number of technology players, and certainly some of the work that Expedia is doing is something that didn't exist 5-10 years ago with their solution. There are other players as well that are providing some of that visibility, and that visibility is at the commercial tier, but also there are a few people, I know some of them are in the audience as well, who are giving you that visibility at the connection level, who is selling, who is just shopping but never booking, right? Who is just confirming what you have so they can undercut it, and things like that. So actually driving accountability at every level. I'd also say, though, one of the things that we ought to all put our heads together and find an answer to is perhaps one of the single biggest disruptions, John, to use your term, in this space was probably, I think it was well after the first Gulf War, but sometime between then and 2001, when the airlines actually stopped addressing one of the things that actually held this whole thing together. The airlines used to insist, and it was a rule, that at least 2 people had to be booked into a package or one of these transactions. And so that created this amazing fence, right? When that airline fence went away, it went away and we just never reacted to it, and we've never been able to repair the breach that the absence of that fence creates.
So the removal of that fence provided a lot of latitude for maybe the bad actors to sell inventory and rates in places that we didn't intend.
Yes, and a lot of the control in terms of product that you're talking about, there was a lot of product control that fence created, and that was sort of just a default in the system. And once it went away, the question is, what do you use to replace that default capability that was there?
Steve, you look at this point from an OTA perspective. You see us hoping to have control over where our rates and inventory go. We're in an electronic world where onward distribution to anywhere and everywhere is possible. Are we naive in saying we want more control? Is more control possible? Are hoteliers disorganized or indecisive? What's your take on this?
Actually, actually attack this two different ways. So first point, it's interesting. Number one, I think at Expedia Group, we really don't see ourselves as just an OTA. I think one thing we really see ourselves as, we are a platform that really provides services, one, as a marketplace, right? So we will be a distribution agent for hotel supply partners who want to leverage our direct customers. But two, we actually provide services actually for the hotel brands themselves. For example, we have a white label package program where, for example, Vacations by Marriott is powered by Expedia. So we want to actually help our hotel partners on their own sites. And third, where our EPS solutions, Expedia Partner Solutions, comes in place as Mr. OD, optimized distribution solutions, we actually help hotels get distribution third parties. So we really look at it as we provide that full suite of services, not just as an OTA. So that's point one. And point two, I'd say 100%, absolutely. Hotels should be able to fence. They should be able to control. There is absolutely no reason why hotels should not say, this room, this rate, I want it through these channels because that's what makes sense for my rev management strategy, that's what makes sense for my brand strategy. And so I think at the end, we look at it as our job is how do we help build tools to give them that ability, give them that power, because I think most people in this industry will acknowledge, right, there is a massive rate abuse problem, and I think, again, it's probably not the majority of partners. I think majority of wholesalers are actually good actors, but that small minority of bad actors, they ruin it for everyone. And I think I use this analogy both with conversations with Gianna and Oral multiple times. We call it the whack-a-mole problem. And the problem is you would have one bad actor, they start abusing a rate. The minute, say, Oral or Gianna can shut them down and figure out how to use a compliance team to stop it, they'll go to a different wholesaler, and then they'll go to a different wholesaler. You have this whole daisy chain of supply and sourcing that you can never figure out who's actually at fault. And thus, and then we look at it, we go, we feel for our partners. We want them to have this solution. So I think my short answer is 100%. They should be able to fence. They should have more control. And I think when you look at the futuristic angle, it's not only should they have those basics, but if you have that control, then you can actually do really cool price, right, elasticity experiments. You can do margin elasticity experiments. You can go figure out how to get unique offerings and promotions for certain high-value demand pools. And so I think there's just really, again, this is why I started with this, there's an amazing opportunity if we can simply shut off the bad actors and actually empower, right, these hotels to do what they do best.
Okay. You paint a very positive picture there, one that makes me optimistic. Gianna, talk about the reality here. Steve talks about control that can take us to a very good place. But it strikes me we've got a combination of commercial arrangements and technology opportunities and limitations. So how do we gain control? How do we establish good relationships with our wholesaler partners out there? What technology do you use to try to make this happen?
So I think this issue around rogue distribution didn't come out of nowhere, and it didn't happen overnight.
Okay.
It took a while to bring us here, and it was a combination of things. And so the solution is also a combination of things. It's not one thing that we need to do. It's a number of things that we need to do. And I'm going to go back to my comment around transparency. Once upon a time, we didn't really know who was the buyer of the wholesaler ever. That was forbidden. That's not the case anymore.
Okay.
It's an important part of the conversation. That's a huge change in the way that we collaborate and we work with them. And also from a technology perspective, I think technology helped accelerate the problem because it helped the bad behavior by creating, APIs that became, off-the-shelf product. And so a seller that wasn't even a seller of travel was just a good technology company, and it was able to take an open API and create an interface and then resell it. All of a sudden became a reseller of travel, right? So it's kind of reversing that, and with the help of some of those same technology companies out there to then say, listen, your customers should be us, the hotelier.
Okay.
Help us reverse this. So I want to have some of that predictive shopping, information ahead of time, and then I can help us, right? So I think it's a combination of things. It's commercial, it's technology, it's relationships, it's going back to basics.
All right.
And it will take time.
Oral, are you optimistic? And where does the technology fit in here? Does it contribute to optimism, or is it overwhelming?
I think I'm optimistic about the future. And part of what, I think drives that optimism is the realization that there is no way out of this. So the answer actually is to go deeper in. You can't run away. And so the technology that's available today enables a degree of engagement that's different. And most of the tech, the media models driven by algorithms and demand data and things like that. That's all happened in the search, and then the sort of more digital side of OTAs, right? None of that tech and capability that actually exists today was put into the traditional leisure space. And there's certainly an opportunity to do that. And like I said, there are a lot of great partners in this room today, companies that have been around a long time, newer companies that are saying, look, we have an answer, or at least part of the answer to this puzzle. And so I think it's time that we kind of wade right into the middle of this thing, as opposed to standing on the edges shouting at it.
I'm interested in what you're saying about technology, and I keep thinking as we get to more and more, or further and further removed partners in the distribution, do we dilute the message? Do we have problems in passing along the content quality that we want, the extent of content, and maybe our dynamic rates? If we don't have negotiated rates, we're getting into more and more dynamic environment and rates. Do we face challenges or frustrations in using wholesalers and portraying ourselves and our rates as fully as we'd like? Gianna, Oral, and then we'll get to Steve.
I mean, there's going to be an element of frustration because
Okay.
it's a change of thinking, right? And as I mentioned in the earlier panel, I think a lot of it is driven by the demand, right? The demand. And so this idea that we could live in this world of negotiated rates and static contracts, and it's just not a thing anymore. The consumer has a specific desire, and that desire needs to be met. And in order to meet that, we need to be more dynamic, right? So whether it's dynamic with our rates, our dynamic with the actual, the entire product, some of it is content. And so that is inevitable. We're moving in that direction, and we just have to keep up with that pace. And so I think because of that, these actors that we're talking about, wholesalers, are super important, because as you look at the world and the different opportunities that exist around the globe, there are some niche markets out there that cannot be satisfied by corporate looking for that business, right? So there's that need there, and there is that desire to get to business for the properties, and it's going to have to come. We're going to have to evolve as the demand grows and changes.
Okay. Let me jump to Steve and then come back to you, Oral. Steve, I want to ask you about your take on technology and whether, as we distribute more broadly, we dilute the message. And then I want to come to Oral and ask him if the pandemic has changed this dynamic. So first of all, message integrity, message credibility, or degradation?
So I'd say in terms of technology, I think it's a multi-pronged problem. So I think there's a technology layer dealing with just pure connectivity, right? How do you enable, right, the rates to get out to everywhere you need to get, and how do you just make sure that it's right, just literally, it's why everyone's here, connectivity. And then I think there's a second layer, which is call it the technology layer of the management of that wholesale channel. And so that's exactly what optimized distribution was built to do, was to really manage that. It was to give control back to the hotel partners. It was to give them enhanced reporting. It was to give them the possibility of fence. It was the ability to give them the ability to drive actionable insights. And so that's kind of call it the implementation layer. And then that implementation layer also includes, right, monitoring of rate abuse. And so the other angle then is pipe. If you don't have one pipe, you go back to the whack-a-mole problem. So when we went, I guess, back to the drawing board back in November of kind of 19, and we launched this and co-built it with Marriott, since then, I think they're publicly on record with a 80% reduction of their metal loss. So what I think you can what you can prove is it's that single pipe, because the reality is if you have a bad actor, and we have the ability of a dedicated partner such as us who is willing to police and ensure compliance, if you're a bad actor and you know there's only a single pipe, you lose access to that, whether it's through suspension or termination. That hits you from your own pocketbook. It hurts you from a revenue standpoint, hurts you from your own customer relevance, right, to whoever you want to offer your inventory to. And so there's real accountability. And so I think for us, we look at it as a combination of the technology, both from the connectivity layer, the implementation layer, the single pipe. That pipe needs to be efficient, a trustworthy single API. And then I think you also need to look at actually kind of the commercials. For example, we took a slightly different approach where we do our distribution via sell rates. So by definition, if you are in our network, you cannot modify that sell rate. I think the vast majority of the industry actually works off of net rates. And what net rates ultimately allow is the bad actors to essentially say, I'm going to go undercut the hotel. And they may do that at the sacrifice of their own margin, but they may make a business decision that I'm willing to do that. I may be willing to risk getting policed. I'm willing to risk hurting my margin because I'm trying to gain share. So I think for us, it's a combination of all the technology angles we just talked about, plus the commercial model, which really sets the foundational framework to enable this industry to get cleaner. And then most importantly, I think we really apply a collaboration point of view, which is how do we work with our partners? How do we have a continual feedback loop so we iterate? And again, if the angle is, hey, we want more production, we can figure out how to solve that need. If the angle is, how do we add more control, then we can build technology solutions that appeal to that need. So kind of, we look at it as a 360 holistic view.
All right. Oral, Steve paints a hopeful picture, which we'd expect him to. You're there in the middle of the battlefield. The last 18 months have been tough. They have seen our market segments shift. Leisure is now king. It's domestic. A lot of things have changed. Has that changed our dependence and interest in wholesalers, our relationship with them, the dialogue? What have you seen in terms of changes, modifications because of the pandemic?
It's a great question. I think, certainly the biggest opportunity I think that the last 18 months offers us is that we saw a significant reduction across the marketplace in offline business. The shift to digital that we were all sort of hoping would happen eventually, it just did. Because there really weren't travelers taking up a lot of that offline business. A lot of it was international in nature, et cetera. And so as the recovery happens, it's incumbent on all of us, I think, to move fast to essentially try to cement some of that gain and not have it all go back the other way where it was in terms of a bigger portion of the mix being offline, which is less controlled. And then I think both Gianna and Steve talked to the multiple layers involved in driving the change, and I think that's the opportunity. There is tech, and all the things I think Steve mentioned, but also I'd say we have to also look at the incentives. You cannot make any change without looking at the incentives of our sales teams, the incentives of our partners, and so again, we've done such a tremendous job of varying the attribution models on the more digital side of the business over the years. But none of that innovation in compensation models and attribution models happened on the traditional side of the business in terms of leisure. I think when you actually put incentives in place to change behavior, coupled with the technology differences, coupled with the reality that some chains have gone all in some directions and so on, it does begin to narrow the field and create some interesting opportunity to make some of the change permanent and to keep making gains.
So the net appears to be positive. You're saying some good things happened.
But we have a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do.
All right. Thank you.
I find it
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
that, and I totally can see why, find it interesting that a lot of the business that we were expecting didn't necessarily come through electronic means and came through, offline, right? And one of the things to me that's indicative of is an issue of trust, which I think is super important, and the issue of relationships, which I think I mentioned earlier, and the value proposition that we as hoteliers offer our franchisees and our hoteliers, right? That's part of our value proposition, to be able to hold those relationships, to be able to create that kind of credibility and trustworthiness, if you will. And so I think those pieces and those elements need to stay as part of the conversation as we digitize more, because that's what we need to do. We need to solve for those things, but we can't solve just with technology. We need to include those other elements into the solve as well, because they play a role.
Okay, good reminder. Thank you. We're coming close to the end, and I want to carve out 2 or 3 minutes for we'll call it case study, of what Expedia is doing with Marriott in terms of the optimized distribution program. We might not necessarily do that under normal circumstances, but here are 2 really significant players who are changing the game to a significant amount. So, Steve, would you give us an update on optimized distribution?
Absolutely. So I think our number one is actually now not just Marriott. So we're actually happy that I think we're publicly also announcing Club Quarters has joined the program, Highgate has joined the program, and what's interesting, it's not just giant chains, right? You have a collection of independents, you have kind of, I'd call it a smaller, medium-sized chain. So number one, I think we're really looking at how do you solve this across, right, the entire ecosystem, not just for Gianna, Oral, and Marriott. So I think we're actually pretty happy. I think the way we really look at it is we've built a really unique, valuable network. And what we've done, I think, is we see the optimized distribution program as ultimately it's a network of great supply combined with great demand. And on the demand side, I think we have over, 1,000 different demand partners, over 100,000 retail travel agents who all kind of plug into this ecosystem. And then on the supply side, we have over 700,000 hotels. So if you think about that value prop, if you're a demand partner, you have great inventory to offer to your customers, your consumers. And on the supply side, you've got incredible reach. And some of these are actually exclusive channels. For example, we have certain banks, certain airlines, which are truly unique demand pools where they actually have sometimes their own currency, whether it's miles or points or whatever else. And you will not get that traveler dollar, but for participating in this ecosystem in which they can leverage those points, miles, or currency. And we think those are probably high value. My guess is most hotels would love to have a high tier, loyalty tier person from an airline or from a financial institution. So I think number one, we really look at it, we've built a great network of both hotels and demand. 2, I think we built great technology, right? So that technology layer is a great API, the reporting backend, and more importantly, I think just the concept of how do you run that single pipe? Mm-hmm. And I think that single pipe really enables the compliance and driving, I think Oral mentioned, driving the incentives, right? So if you put the right incentives and demand partners to behave properly, you will get a good ecosystem. And if you have a system in place where you can actually spot bad actors and actually then make them accountable, it just cleans up the entire industry. So we really look at how do you do something with clean hands. And I think one unique angle that we always describe to our partners is we have that OTA side relationship. So if we mess up on this B2B side, we have billions of dollars at risk with our core relationship with our hotel supply partners, which just adds that extra gravitas and adds that extra accountability on our end to get this right. And so
you're motivated.
Exactly. And then I think we look at really kind of the almost kind of like where do you go from here, right? And again, I think having that single pipe, having that control, giving hotels the ability to really put the, kind of manage their brand strategies, manage their revenue strategies. Again, it's pretty exciting where you can go with the data, and not just data, but enhanced actionable insights. And where do you go? We can take trends from destination, right? Airline capacity data. You can take all of this and compile it together and give them, right, great tools to say, hey, here's where you go seek the demand you're looking for. And then you can also then take, right, again, that compliance data and really figure out who do you not want to give your inventory to, who's actually causing you problems in meta, and you just clean that up overnight. So again, we're quite pleased, I think, with where we've gotten over the last 2 years. Again, Marriott's proven that they've both hit the production that they've been looking to get by going all in with us, as well as getting that kind of control and the cleansing effect. So,
Okay. That's a good summary. Appreciate it. We do not have time for questions. We knew we'd be going right down to the wire. That's the bad news. The good news is that our speakers are going to be here for the duration and are eager to talk about this in further detail. So as you see them tonight with a drink in their hand, or in the morning as they're trying to do their scrambled eggs, feel free to corner them and continue the conversation. Last question. Are you optimistic? I think, Steve, you've been optimistic through this. I think you're feeling good about this. I want to hear in 30 seconds if you see reason for hope, and then Oral, and last word will be Gianna. Are we hopeful? Are we feeling good about this?
I'm extremely hopeful. I'm also clear-headed that there's a massive problem, but I do believe the solution exists today, and I think we can solve it relatively quickly if the industry gets together, decides, we have the willpower to do this.
Okay, thank you. Oral.
I am absolutely hopeful. I believe in the collective genius of the folks in this room.
I'm also hopeful, and I think we can use more than just one pipe, just with a few pipes, but I think we'll be good.
I like the idea of collective genius. Ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in thanking our wonderful speakers?